Power was inherited. Authority was biological. Legitimacy depended on blood. These were the most important rules monarchies ever used to justify absolute power. Divine right. Monarchs didn't just think they ruled countries. They thought they ruled because God personally picked them. That belief was called the divine right of kings, and it turned bloodlines into holy artifacts. A king's authority wasn't voted on, earned, or negotiated. It was inherited through blood, supposedly passed down like a sacred cable directly from heaven. If the bloodline stayed pure, God was still on your side. If it broke, married wrong, or produced the wrong heir, it meant divine favor had expired. That made blood purity a political emergency. Kings weren't just rulers, they were walking religious proof. Diluting the bloodline meant weakening the link between heaven and the throne, so monarchs only married inside a tiny circle of chosen families. Everyone else was biologically unqualified to rule. King James I of England took this idea seriously enough to write about it. He called kings the breathing images of God upon earth, and argued that resisting royal commands was basically rebelling against God himself. His obsession with divine blood didn't just justify tyranny. It helped light the fuse for the English Civil War when people finally decided God might not actually be signing royal birth certificates. Preventing war. Bloodlines weren't just about ego. They were about damage control. In a world without elections or constitutions, a clear royal bloodline was the closest thing medieval states had to an operating system. When a king died, everyone needed to know who was next, immediately. No debates, no auditions, no civil war starter pack. If succession was unclear, nobles would fight over the throne like vultures over a corpse, dragging entire countries into decades of violence. A strict hereditary line turned power transfer into an automatic process. King dies, heir takes over, life goes on. Merchants keep trading, farmers keep farming, and cities don't burn down just because one man stopped breathing. This is why monarchs panicked over heirs. Henry VII of England founded the Tudor dynasty specifically to stop the Wars of the Roses, a 30-year bloodbath caused by competing family claims. By marrying Elizabeth of York, he welded two rival bloodlines together and ended the chaos. His obsession with producing sons wasn't personal insecurity. It was trauma. He knew that if his bloodline failed, England would instantly relapse into dynastic slaughter. For monarchs, blood wasn't romance. It was a ceasefire agreement written in DNA marriage diplomacy. Royal marriages were never love stories. They were contracts written in blood. Every wedding was a geopolitical move, every child a potential annexation. By marrying into another dynasty, monarchs turned family trees into international treaties. You were far less likely to invade a kingdom ruled by your son-in-law or your grandson. And if that foreign ruler died without an heir, congratulations. Your wife's blood just gave you a legal excuse to claim an entire country. No siege required. This made marriage the most efficient weapon in history. Dynasties expanded without firing arrows or paying soldiers. Romance was irrelevant. The bride and groom were assets, and their future children were political investments. No family mastered this better than the Habsburgs. Emperor Maximilian I treated marriage like conquest. Through carefully planned unions, his descendants inherited Spain, Burgundy, Bohemia, and massive overseas empires. Their saying said it all: let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. While other kingdoms bled themselves dry on battlefields, the Habsburgs quietly collected continents through weddings, proving that bloodlines could conquer more territory than armies ever could. Wealth retention. Bloodlines were also about money, a lot of it. In the feudal world, land was wealth, and wealth was power. If a king died without a clear heir, his lands didn't politely wait for a replacement. Rival nobles grabbed pieces, distant relatives made claims, and the kingdom fractured like a dropped plate. By locking inheritance strictly inside the bloodline, monarchs kept the entire national fortune concentrated in one family. Crown lands, tax revenue, jewels, and estates all moved intact from father to child. No splitting, no sharing. This allowed royal families to build absurd, multi-generation wealth that no noble could challenge. Louis XIV of France perfected this system. The Bourbon bloodline controlled the crown estate as a single, untouchable unit. That financial stability paid for Versailles, a palace so expensive it functioned as a warning. It wasn't just a home, it was a monument to concentrated blood wealth. Every hallway screamed the same message: this money belongs to one family, and it always will. Paternity security. If power is inherited through blood, then one question becomes terrifyingly important. Whose blood is it, really? That's why monarchies became obsessed with controlling queens' bodies. One affair could turn the entire political system into a lie. single illegitimate child on the throne didn't just embarrass the king, it shattered the legal and divine foundation of the state. This is why royal births were public spectacles, witnessed by nobles to prove no baby swap happened. Queens were guarded, monitored, and punished not as wives, but as vessels of national legitimacy. Henry VIII took this paranoia to its logical extreme. When Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard were accused of adultery, he didn't see scandal, he saw treason. In his mind, they weren't unfaithful spouses, they were threats to the Tudor bloodline itself. Their executions weren't about jealousy, they were about protecting the DNA that justified his crown. Lifelong training. A royal bloodline wasn't just inheritance. It was a training program that started at birth and never stopped. Unlike elected leaders who could stumble into power unprepared, heirs were groomed for rule from the moment they could walk. Every lesson, habit, and punishment was designed around one future outcome: wearing the crown. They learned languages to negotiate, law to command, military strategy to survive, and etiquette to dominate court politics. The bloodline functioned like a private academy for rulers, ensuring continuity even when individual kings were weak. Frederick the Great of Prussia is the clearest example. His father believed the survival of the Prussian state depended on producing a perfect soldier king. Frederick was beaten, humiliated, and forced into relentless military discipline despite his love for music and philosophy. The system worked. The bloodline crushed the boy, but it forged one of Europe's greatest rulers. For monarchies, this lifelong grooming wasn't cruelty, it was quality control, stopping assassins. A strong bloodline made murder pointless. If a king had a clear heir, killing him didn't end the system, it just advanced the schedule. One ruler falls, another with the same policies, allies, and grudges takes his place. For would-be assassins, that was a terrible return on investment. You'd be tortured, executed, and remembered as a failure, while the regime continued uninterrupted. This is why monarchies obsessed over visible succession. The crown had to look immortal, even if the king wasn't. In France, King Louis XV survived an assassination attempt in 1757. The country didn't erupt into chaos because everyone already knew who came next. The Bourbon line was secure, and the Dauphin stood ready. Contrast that with Rome, where emperors without clear heirs were routinely murdered by the Praetorian Guard because killing them changed everything. Bloodlines didn't just protect dynasties, they acted as armor for the king's life. National identity. Over time, royal bloodlines stopped being just about power and turned into national symbols. The king wasn't only a ruler, he was history in human form. His family line connected the living population to legendary founders, ancient victories, and a shared past that felt almost magical. When people said the crown, they didn't mean a job, they meant the family. In multi-ethnic empires especially, bloodlines were the glue holding everything together. Languages, cultures, and religions might differ, but loyalty flowed toward the same royal DNA. Maria Theresa of Austria understood this perfectly. When her rule was challenged, she didn't argue legal theory. She appeared before Hungarian nobles holding her infant son. The message was simple and powerful. This child is the future you've sworn loyalty to. Defy him, and you break centuries of tradition. Bloodlines worked because they turned political obedience into emotional identity. Social hierarchy. Royal blood wasn't just inheritance. It was a biological firewall. By claiming their blood was fundamentally different, monarchs created a social ceiling no one else could break through. You could be rich, powerful, even feared, but without the right blood, you were still beneath the throne. This mattered because it kept ambitious nobles in check. If wealth or talent alone could make a king, every duke would eventually try. Bloodlines shut that door permanently. The crown wasn't a promotion. It was a birth defect you either had or didn't. This hierarchy was enforced obsessively at court. Titles, seating, clothing, even who stood closest to the monarch were all determined by blood proximity. Tsar Nicholas II embodied this mindset. He and his wife believed the Romanovs were not merely aristocrats, but divinely elevated beings. They isolated themselves from the nobility, convinced that mixing too closely with lesser blood weakened the sacred aura of their dynasty. Blood wasn't symbolism. It was social law written into the body. Financial credit. In the pre-modern world, kingdoms didn't have credit scores, kings did. National debt was treated as the monarch's personal promise, and lenders cared less about borders than bloodlines. If a king died without a clear heir, bankers feared their money died with him. Loans froze, interest exploded, wars stopped mid-campaign. A stable bloodline told creditors one thing: this state will still exist tomorrow. Even if one king failed, his son would inherit the crown and the debt. That predictability kept money flowing. This is why monarchs panicked over heirs as much as enemies. Philip II of Spain defaulted multiple times, yet Europe's biggest bankers kept lending anyway. Why? The Habsburg bloodline looked permanent. The crown wasn't a person, it was a dynasty that would outlive any single ruler and eventually pay up. For monarchies, producing an heir wasn't just survival, it was collateral. These beliefs turned blood into power, family into law, and inheritance into destiny, shaping who ruled, who suffered, and how entire kingdoms rose or collapsed.